Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. As you can see, today I'm with James Green once again, and we're going to be talking with our friends from Flexential. And we'd like to welcome to the show Will Bass and Craig Cook. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Craig, can you go first?
Sure. Craig Cook. I lead the solutions architecture and engineering teams at Flexential. I spent my career basically on the infrastructure side of IT, and mostly the consulting and service provider space. And my team works with customers to really kind of understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and figure out what solutions we have that kind of map to that, and help them design those to meet their needs.
Will?
Yeah, thanks. I lead the cybersecurity practice for our professional services organization. So we do things like security assessments, penetration testing, and disaster recovery. So really kind of helping our clients, kind of wherever they are, to make sure that they're safe and secure before someone comes in and tries to make them unsafe and unsecure.
Awesome. So, Craig, we actually met you at a conference earlier this year, but for our audience who may not be familiar with Flexential, can you tell us a little bit about your organization?
Sure. So Flexential is a hybrid IT provider, and really we're focused on the data center and infrastructure services space. So we have a national platform of data centers across the U.S. Connected by a high-speed backbone that we manage and maintain and own. And on top of that, we add a number of services that add value in that space around things like infrastructure as a service, data protection, and some managed services and professional services to help customers fill some of those needs that they may not be able to handle themselves.
Will, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, Craig covered it pretty well. I mean, really it is, we kind of have, we can help just about every customer out there in some way, shape, or form with their IT and security needs.
Well, Will, my first question is for you. You are responsible for the disaster recovery and cybersecurity professional services at Flexential. How do you view cybersecurity in relation to data restore and recovery solutions?
Yeah, so really, kind of a lot of our philosophy is like based on like the NIST, NSF. So kind of with that is, you kind of have those different areas. You have identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So when you're talking about disaster recovery, that really fits right into that aspect. So it helps with that kind of that respond and recover aspects. You need to make sure that you have that integrated in with your cybersecurity program, your cybersecurity team, because the other big kind of aspect here is, the most likely disaster today is going to be a cyber threat. Ransomware obviously being the biggest one, but it could be, bad actors getting in. So making sure that you have your cybersecurity program and your disaster recovery program kind of hand in hand, making sure that you have multiple ways to recover if something happens, having a DR solution, but also having backups, because that's one thing we've seen is when you have customers that get hit with some sort of a cyber attack, it's usually you end up using multiple solutions to recover from something like that. So I think it's a good kind of data restore and recovery program and solution is going to have that kind of defense in depth, and it's going to go hand in hand with your cybersecurity program as well.
I miss the old days of the worst case scenario was a corrupt tape drive. Certainly, for sure. All right. So Craig, so the whole world's talking about AI, and I think by law, every interview we do, we have to talk about AI. It's top of mind for everyone. It's the biggest question we get from C-suite. There's this AI boom. What's happening? So I'd love to hear from you. When you think of AI at Flexential, what does that mean to you guys? And are you integrating any AI capability into your DR or data center operations?
Yeah, so it is impacting a lot of things right now, and it's being talked about a lot. It's obviously still somewhat nascent overall, as in terms of how it's penetrating the industry, but it's certainly having a huge impact, even just on us from, you know, an overall capacity perspective, as everybody is trying to spin up AI capabilities and integrate those into their products and services, as well as then customers are trying to figure out how to, you know, how to consume those. So, you know, it's definitely a, you know, a trend we're seeing as well. I think, you know, when it comes specifically to, you know, disaster recovery, data protection, and things like that, and how you know, AI is being integrated into that, I think, you know, number one, where I see it and where we're leveraging it is in the, you know, detection and sort of anomaly detection, I'll call it, right? So being able to identify when something's happening that is, you know, is unusual activity that, you know, is more than likely the result of what you know, we'll refer to as those bad actors, right? Those people getting in and starting to snoop around your environment and starting to make, you know, maybe changes to certain things just to sort of see what your response and your reaction is. And, you know, it's really hard for humans to kind of keep track of all that. And I think it's just such the perfect application of AI in terms of, you know, being able to take this massive amount of data that's happening across the world and across the enterprise and try and, you know, try and correlate it and try and understand what's happening. And, you know, if nothing else, just flag it for somebody to go look into deeper. And so I think, you know, that is one, you know, one aspect of it that is really critical, because, you know, often, you know, those bad actors, they come in and they sit and they're, you know, they're very patient, they're very quiet. And so it's often hard for people to realize that they are in the environment and that they do have access to things they shouldn't, and that they're starting to, you know, plan nefarious activities. And so, you know, the smarter you can get around that, and the more you can leverage the tools that are coming out or that are already out, I think the better for us and our customers. And so we're doing everything we can to just continue to stay ahead of that and integrate as much of that type of capability as possible.
That's really thoughtful use, because sometimes I walk into an organization's security operations center and they've got 400 displays and there's 10,000 lines of data. And I often think, like, how are you've got 12 GSOC analysts or 12 SOC analysts. What are you doing with all that data in real time? I feel like it's almost for show. So I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in that position to have to try and, you know, understand all of that. And so the more we can be smart about how we surface and correlate those things, you know, I think as an industry, you know, that's how we're going to continue to stay ahead of this, or, you know, or do our best to react, because it's, you know, it's constantly changing.
I'm curious, we're going to go off script here. Will, how about AI in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, it's really big. I mean, it's kind of funny because I think, you know, half of it, I mean, everyone is kind of attached to AI to their product now. And, you know, half the time it's actually not doing anything different. They just put it in there. But there's other areas where it's really helping. You know, I think the SOC is a great example where it's really helping there. I think from a bad actor perspective right now, it's really around the social engineering aspect is really where we're seeing it. So they're writing better phishing emails. They're being able to translate it into multiple languages. So like Japan didn't have a phishing problem before AI. Now, because the language is so hard to use and translate into, but now you can do it. So now we've actually helped customers that had Japanese affiliates that, you know, had an attack. It was a business email compromise, basically attack to have money transferred, and it worked because they had a very kind of trusting, you know, very trusting culture, and they weren't trained or understood kind of the threat that a lot of other like here in the United States we understand, because we've been bombarded with it for years.
My next question, Will, you've dealt with obviously many different companies around the world and different sizes and probably in different industries as well. What advice do you have for those organizations that are just starting to really look at their DR strategy?
Yeah, so I think the key here is you know, first you need to understand what are the most important workloads that you need to protect. So that's going to be really the key. So what are those? Because you know, a good DR strategy is going to have, you know, kind of different recovery methods. And so what you want to do here is you basically kind of you want to go through, you want to tier your workload so you can understand, okay, what needs, you know, kind of like a high availability solution versus what needs, you know, something that needs to be up within, you know, so like a low RTO, RPO type thing, it needs to be up within a couple hours, just lose a little bit of data, versus what kind of can be a longer term, whether it's like archive storage or your development systems that maybe you can just restore from backup. So understanding that so that you can mix your solution, and this is something that we're really good at, is that we have that ability to kind of help design that. So like my team, we have what we call design and planning, so we can actually come in and help design what does that look like, what does that hybrid DR environment look like, and then we deliver your DR plan for you along with a runbook template so that you can get down to that procedural level as well. So that's kind of key is being able to spend the time and money and effort on those workloads you really need to protect. So once you kind of identify those, focus on those, and then move down the stack. And so because you want to protect everything, but how you do it and how much money you spend on it is going to depend on kind of where that tiering is. So once you understand that, then you can kind of move through the rest of the process.
I like that philosophy because we see a lot of organizations make the mistake that, they want to have 4 nines or 5 nines for all their systems and for all their data. And that never makes sense to me. There is data that's more critical than others. There are systems that are more critical than others. So why are you having, your marketing database have the same amount of uptime and security as you are with like PII? So
Yes.
that's a huge mistake we see, because we see a lot of organizations say, well, DR is too expensive. And it's because they're treating everything as their tier 1, RTO of 5 minutes kind of craziness when it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Focus on those customer-facing applications, the ones that are going to bring revenue into the business. That's what you want to spend that money on. Whereas, like you said, that back office thing, it might be okay if it's down for hours or days, depending on what it is. So that's exactly right, and good way to balance that the cost with availability.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've been, to James's point and yours, how many times I've been in arguments with marketing people or salespeople. We're critical. We're the most, we got to have our stuff up immediately. Not always.
Yeah, I always find it's a negotiation. You kind of start with, here's what I would like to do, right? That's the customer coming to us typically, or even in prior lives when I was consulting, helping them build their plans and stuff. And you just have to work through it and get to a point where it's like, okay, what you're asking for is going to cost X. Is that acceptable, right? And usually you work through this negotiation of, and it ends up being, I kind of joke with customers about, it ends up being, how much can I get for this? And then, there's an aspect of that, but then you also have to, work to make sure that actually maps to the business requirements. And in some cases, that means building business cases to help justify the expense of, either, mitigating that risk or protecting those assets, right? So it is very much there's rarely a one size fits all for any reasonably sized corporation.
But you joke about that, but a lot of times a CIO or a CISO does have a budget, and that's all they're getting. And then the business expects them to do everything with that. So I think that's where your services come in, is, okay, let's reverse engineer based on that budget. Let's prioritize what's really important to the organization in terms of data or revenue. So we've kind of talked about AI, we've talked about cyber, we've talked about DR. And for me, a lot of that falls under this term a lot of us use now, resilient, organizational resilience or operational resilience. So Craig, I'd love to hear from you. How do you feel? How is Flexential making organizations more resilient?
Yeah, I think it starts at the data center level in terms of just, the uptime and availability of the data center itself, right? And then that is the foundation for everything that we're building. Layer on top of that the network side of it, because if the systems are up and you can't access them, that doesn't really help you a whole lot, right? And then, from there, you've got to build an infrastructure that maps and supports the needs of that. And, Will said something earlier that I think is critical, right? Like it's rare that in the event, especially in, let's just call it the worst case scenario, which unfortunately is becoming more common for a lot of companies, these ransomware type attacks, where, almost all their systems, if not all their systems, are affected. It becomes very hard to say, okay, there's only one mechanism which we're going to use to restore, right? You don't have necessarily the same level of granularity of that. So you can't have just one tool in the toolbox. You have to have, protection in layers and defense in depth. And I think that's such a critical aspect to it. And I think that's where our breadth of services come in and really help customers. In some cases, they already have solutions they want to leverage and that they've designed themselves and they work just fine for whether that be secondary storage to put backups into, or, our DRAS solution to be able to replicate, to and be able to, tap into on-demand compute and things like that, right? There's options there that they have that map to different needs, and like that flexibility to handle different situations, because like we said, they're not all the same. And in some cases, there's you want, whether it's air gapped immutability or something else that gives you some options depending on how bad the damage is effectively. I think that's just really the power that we can bring. And then when you layer on top of that, Will's team and the expertise they have both in the planning and the the mitigation and response side of that, it just brings an extra set of capabilities that a lot of customers, frankly, just they don't have, because they ideally don't do this every day, right? They don't want to be doing this every day. It's not their core business. And I think ultimately it helps. We see this across industries, across customers, and we have a tremendous amount of expertise and experience across that, unfortunately. That just means that we can help customers, either knowing what to do to get to the result faster, or in the planning. I think, and the planning part is so important, but being able to plan accordingly so that what you're trying to protect against, and the likelihood of those things and the impact if they happen, just gives you I think a leg up that we can we can really help customers in that regard.
Yeah, you said that you can't have you need more than one tool in your toolbox. And that's so important, because Will, you were talking about earlier, these threat actors, they don't just break in and hit you with ransomware the same day. They sit for months, for a long time, and map out everything and find everything you're doing. So if you only have one fail-safe, I would think that's already compromised.
And the one thing I'd add on, that's a great answer by Craig there, but is the testing piece too. That's the other piece a lot of organizations miss, is you need to test your solutions. You need to, it's backups. You need to be doing test restores from your backups. If it's, DR, you need to actually test. You actually need to fail over into the environment, make sure it can run. Can you fail back as well? Make sure that you can do that. But it also extends to like tabletop exercises. So because that's your technical solution, but what about the rest of the team? That's one area where you see some customers kind of forget, is in an actual disaster, it's not just your IT team bringing it up. It's going to have to be communicating with stakeholders internally and externally. You might have to have finance involved, because you might be having to go buy systems and from wherever, just to help restore. So depending on what it is, so making sure that you're ready for it, that you've done that testing piece of it as well. So the technical piece and the non-technical piece. And then that also, the other big advantage there is you're going to find issues when you do that you can then plug. So it's, you're not doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that's usually when these things happen. So.
Yeah,
Yes,
point.
I've got a feeling many of us have experienced that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's a question for both of you, and I'll start with you, Will. You did mention trends earlier about AI, but what other trends are you seeing in either disaster recovery or resilience, or in what you do with working with your clients? What other things should we be aware of?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One is you're starting to see kind of more of a merger between cybersecurity and kind of disaster recovery, and I think really kind of that driver of now that a cyber incident is going to be your most likely reason to actually enact your DR plan, and we see that with our customers as well. That has kind of starting to drive that. So you're starting to see a lot more of these being integrated into. I mentioned NIST CSF earlier. It's a great framework for organizations to kind of use for their cybersecurity program. But you're now seeing that from a DR perspective. So you're really kind of starting to see that aspect of those two organizations merging, which I think is even though they usually stay separate orgs, but they're having to work closely together to make sure that they're prepared for when something happens. So I think that's really kind of one of the big things that I've been seeing lately, is just that kind of that cross working between what DR does and cybersecurity.
Greg? Anything to add?
Um, I don't know that I have a ton to add there. I think, the trend I see is just continue to, enhance and expand it, right? If you look at what people used to do, sort of 10, 15 years ago, it was like, just I had tape backups and, or, well, maybe more than that, but I had tape backups and I restore from them. And, just the difference in the number of technologies, the different types of systems you have to protect, everything from on-prem to co-located workloads to private cloud to public cloud. Like there's a lot that customers have to deal with. And, most of them just aren't well equipped. I think, having the right preparation and planning and the right partner to help in that is just critical. And I think, the resilience side of things is becoming more and more I think obvious, like for better or for worse. The ransomware type of stuff that's making the news is really driving, a bit of fear that's driving action, I guess, for customers, because in the past, a lot of them didn't feel like they were really susceptible. And so often they didn't take enough action, right? They thought they were, what they had was probably good enough. And then, all of a sudden these attacks that are quick, fast, widespread, and, can happen to almost anybody. And to Will's point about things like, it's as simple as somebody clicking on an email they shouldn't have. Right. And, all of a sudden that starts this chain of events that is really, really difficult and crippling for businesses. And so I just think it's the awareness around it has gone up, tenfold or more. And so as a result, the types of solutions that people are searching for, have evolved and expanded. And luckily the services that are available, to them and the options they have also expanded. So, it's I don't want to say it's a fun time, but it's fun to work with customers. I mean, these are fun problems to solve from a technologist standpoint. They're not fun when you have to impact or when you have to feel the impact of them from the the end result perspective, because they're very stressful and can be incredibly damaging to businesses. But from a technologist standpoint, they're interesting challenges to go solve for sure.
James, do you have any final questions for Will or Craig?
No, I agree with Craig. Maybe not a fun time, but certainly an interesting time. And what I find exciting is in other aspects of risk management, you often have to convince management why what we're doing is relevant. But right now, especially with what Flexential does with cybersecurity, with data security, you don't have to convince management that this is important. They already know. They're coming to us, they're coming to organizations like Flexential and say, hey, we need to get more robust risk management techniques here. So yeah, absolutely.
And if somebody wants to get in touch with Flexential or learn something more about you or ask about your products and services, how can they reach you?
The best way is to go through our website, flexential.com. You'll be able to contact us through there, and we'll have somebody reach out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Will. Thank you so much, Craig and James. Always a pleasure. And all the best to everyone at the team at Flexential. And we'll talk to you soon. Stay prepared, everybody.